Thanks, Nora. We are going to begin the resistance report in the south this week in Rafah, where the main battle space at this point in the war is. Israel's claiming to be attacking the final 4 battalions, as they call it, in Rafah. But we've been talking about this all throughout the war. These numbers are arbitrary numbers that don't have anything to do with the number of fighters that are in Rafah, or the strength of the battalions, or the ability of the battalions to reform themselves and to move from different areas. Like we're seeing the map here of all of Gaza. You can see how fighters can move from Khan Yunis down to Rafah. So the main battle space is in Rafah. We'll look at this map a little closer in. I want to just thank Maxwell for this map and for everybody that answered my call for the maps last week. Lots of audience participation, and we've got a good map here to show us the main areas that we're going to be talking about today. Tel Sultan is the site of the significant operation this week, but we're also going to be talking about the Philadelphia corridor. So if we look at this map, this next map, we can see the way the Philadelphia corridor runs. This is a 15-kilometer corridor that runs along the Egyptian border. It divides Rafah, Gaza from Rafah, Egypt. It's right along the border. And as I've said over the last few weeks, this is a demilitarized zone. So Israel moving quickly up this line and capturing, taking a full operational control, as they say, over the Philadelphia corridor is not a significant military achievement. But what it has done is stretched their supply lines significantly along the border. As I said, 15-kilometer long border. And they created this border. I described on the show last week how they created this border during the Second Intifada by demolishing hundreds of houses along this corridor to push the houses back off the border. And I talked about some of the significant resistance operations along the Philadelphia corridor. And interestingly, the next day, 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐿 published a poster of showing, we'll look at number 2 here. This poster from, this poster says this 20 years later, your soldiers are still searching for their remains in the sands. So this is the result of an operation in May 2004 that targeted an Israeli troop carrier, and the soldiers' very high profile scene that you're seeing here, that all Palestinians know. This is one of the very symbolic moments of the Second Intifada, when these Israeli soldiers are crawling along the Philadelphia corridor, literally looking for the remains of the soldiers that were in the troop carrier that was blown up. And it's interesting that that came out this week, because in a way it was a foreshadowing of a very significant operation that went down this week along the Philadelphia corridor in Tel Sultan. But let me just tell you a little bit about the 2004 operation. This is reading from the Washington Post, May 13th, Washington Post, 2004. Hundreds of Israeli soldiers searched the border area between Gaza and Egypt on Thursday for the remains of 5 soldiers killed in a huge explosion on Wednesday. The explosion occurred around 6 p.m. when a militant from the radical group Islamic Jihad fired a shoulder-launched rocket-propelled grenade at a convoy of 3 Israeli armored vehicles that had stopped along the border to blow up the entrance of a smuggling tunnel, according to Israeli officials and a statement by Islamic Jihad, 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐿. The rocket hit an armored personnel carrier containing 1,750 pounds of explosives, causing a tremendous blast that killed 5 soldiers, injured 3 others, and reportedly sent debris flying as far as half a mile away. Israeli soldiers fanned out to secure a wide area around the blast site so that Palestinian militants would not seize any of the body parts and hold them for ransom, as they did on a Tuesday attack that killed 6 soldiers in Gaza City. So that's from the 2004, the newspaper report in 2004. And we see the photo here from that report. And this photo is very symbolic. As I said, every Palestinian knows about this. You can see the border there. That's the Philadelphia corridor. That's the border with Egypt that you're looking at there. You can see a watchtower in the background. The Israelis would use that watchtower to shoot into the camp, and their tanks and armored vehicles would drive along the corridor that you see these soldiers crawling right now. And I lived in Rafah during this time, and it was a lot of the things that we see the drones doing today, playing sounds of crying children or playing, tormenting noises, tormenting the population. That's what these tanks and armored personnel carriers driving along the border would do. They would taunt and swear at people inside the camps. They would fire at the homes inside the camps with tracer bullets, so you could see them flying over your head and hitting the buildings. They used this corridor as a terror corridor against the population in Rafah. And so there's a long history to this particular corridor, the Philadelphia corridor. The name has no meaning. Apparently, the name just came from an Israeli operation name. It's obviously often mispronounced as Philadelphia corridor, but it's the Philadelphia corridor. And you can see from the poster that 𝐄𝐿 𝐄𝐿 put out this week that they remember this moment. And if we look at the number 4 here, because there was an operation in Tel Sultan, with what we see there is this is the Army radio, Israeli Army radio report. There's no video from this particular operation, but this is the Army radio report. And you can see down below the picture of a Namer troop carrier. This is the up-armored troop carrier that they put into service essentially because of the failures of their troop carriers in the Second Intifada. So the history is rich along this corridor. And let me just describe to you what the Israeli Army radio report said. So this was an operation that was carried out on Saturday. On Saturday, 11 Israeli soldiers were killed in separate incidents along the corridor, and 8 were killed in this one particular strike on this Namer troop carrier. The IDF says that the APC, the armored personnel carrier, was hit while traveling on the axis in the Tel Sultan neighborhood in West Rafah. The APC was very badly damaged, and the explosion was very powerful. It killed everybody on board. The event occurred at 5 p.m. The convoy in which the APC was traveling was the 5th of a 6-vehicle convoy, and they had just finished an attack on the Tel Sultan neighborhood, and their fighters were going to a building where they were attempting to spend the night. The APC was hit in the exact same axis as other vehicles, the IDF says, had traveled earlier, which again this is me, not the IDF. That's again showing you the reconnaissance, intelligence, and surveillance of the Qassam brigades and the other fighting groups in this particular area. The IDF is noting that they believed that this corridor that these armored vehicles were traveling on was safe because they had previously traveled on it in the same day. This was a Namer combat engineering vehicle with many explosive materials in it, the IDF reports. These are explosives. This is me again. These are explosives that we know are used to put inside houses. The Israelis are using anti-tank mines to blow up houses, to blow up entire neighborhoods. We've seen them do that because it's basically a cost-effective way of destroying the neighborhoods. The aerial bombardment, the fighter jets are more expensive. The weaponry is more expensive from the jets. And so the Israelis have been cutting corners by wiring anti-tank mines into these buildings and blowing them up. And so we saw this happen again in the middle camps back a few months ago when 21 soldiers were killed in a Yasin strike, a shoulder-fired, rocket-propelled grenade fired at a building that was full of Israeli soldiers who, and their mines that they were using to lay mines in the Maghazi refugee camp. So they're doing the same kind of thing here in Rafah. And again, because of that, they are targeted. They're hit with a Yasin up close. the trophy active protection system, the countermeasure that the tank has, which we've been covering for the last 8 months. Israel says that it's perfect and it gets every single incoming round, but we obviously know that's very far from the truth. And we have another example of it here, the IDF saying that the trophy active protection system did not engage this Yassin shooter who was firing from up close. The Palestinian fighters are getting into proximity close enough that the radar is not picking up and responding with their countermeasures in time to stop these attacks. And I've read on previous shows what it's like to be an Israeli soldier inside one of these armored vehicles when the Yassin round penetrates. And here we have just a very stark example of it. So it took them, the IDF, more than 2 hours to actually even access the site of the explosion. And if we look at this next image here, the Qassam brigades showed, again, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance showing, this is Qassam footage given to Al Jazeera, showing 2 IDF D9 armored bulldozers pulling the destroyed APC, the Namer troop carrier. And you can see that the Israelis have actually, it's coming into the screen here, the Israelis actually covered over the vehicle. You can see it has no tracks. The tracks have been blown off, and they have put a cover over the vehicle to hide the damage inside this vehicle. There was 8 soldiers killed, and it took them 2 days to identify the last 2 soldiers. They couldn't tell who was who in this in the aftermath of this operation. So you can see it takes 2 bulldozers to pull it, and it's pulled without tracks. And this is something that the Israelis have done with all of their armor. They don't leave the vehicle behind as trophies. They literally drag them, even though they have no tracks. They're just dragging the vehicle, the 60-ton armored vehicle, just dragging it along. We could loop this video maybe one more time and give people another chance to see it. So the Israelis at first, the Israelis continually deny the effectiveness of the Yassin 105, despite the casualty reports that they have all over. And in this situation here, these were the 22nd acknowledged casualty, 22nd killed in Rafah in 40 days of battle. The Israelis acknowledged those 8 soldiers killed on Saturday, and they always call these situations a difficult event. And people knew about this event, again, because of the buzz within Israel, but the military censor, because of that buzz, is sort of forced to be honest about these particular difficult situations in a way that they're less able to cover up these large events than they are the individual events along the way. And so let me just, so the Israelis, after this operation, the IDF called for a tactical pause throughout the course of the day. So the Israeli military said that there would be a tactical pause in military activity in areas in the southern Gaza Strip to enable humanitarian aid to be delivered to Palestinians. The IDF says the pause will take place between 8 a.m. and 7 p.m. every day along the road that leads from Kerem Shalom crossing to the Salahuddin Road, and northwards towards the Khan Yunis area. So they announced this tactical pause that we all heard reported on the news. The tactical pause was announced after this difficult operation in which 8 soldiers were killed in this troop carrier. And just to sort of underline the dysfunction in the Israeli military civilian apparatus right now, the defense minister, Yoav Gallant, he was quoted on Army radio. His people were quoted in Army radio saying that he didn't know. No one told him about the tactical pause. Nobody in the IDF told the government, is the statement or the sources. It wasn't a statement. It was sources close to Gallant said that he hadn't heard about that. And as I said, the casualties were so significant, it took the Israelis 2 full days to identify people. And they acknowledge that in 40 days of fighting in Rafah, where they claim that they have operational control over half of Rafah, which is just absurd. Rafah is a sprawling city, and we know that they fought, for example, in Khan Yunis for more than 6 months. They fought in Khan Yunis, and now they're saying in Rafah, fighting with half as many troops, they're saying that they have half of Rafah under control in 40 days. And these kind of numbers are just nonsense, but it's important to bring to you just to give you the sense of how the Israelis are building this narrative, because they're trying to have an end game where they tick all the boxes of the military accomplishments or objectives are being reached. So they've been talking all war about the 4 battalions that were still left in Rafah. And as I said off the top, that is not a meaningful way to describe the fighting force. The battalions are different sizes. They're able to reconstitute. They're able to form, link up with battalions from Khan Yunis or from anywhere else in Gaza for that matter. The battalions aren't all the same. They aren't all identical. There's special forces battalions. There's more highly trained battalions. So it's not just something that you can check off on a list, like we have degraded 2 of the 4 battalions in Rafah. And you can see that the Israelis have paid a stiff price for this. And just to give you the casualty numbers, because they talked about it after this and they released it. And again, everything that we get in the Israeli media, we know is subjected to the Israeli military censor. And it's the 162nd Division that is fighting in Rafah right now. And there's been, at any given time, right now, there's 3 divisions fighting in Gaza. There's one, they pulled the one from the north. There was one in the north that was fighting in Jabalia and Jabalia camp, 1 division in the Netzarim corridor, and 1 division in the south fighting in Rafah. And the Israelis said yesterday in the media that the 162nd Division that has been fighting in Gaza since October 7th, that 3,800 soldiers have been wounded from that division alone. 180 have been killed in combat. So 3,800 wounded just from the 162nd Division. And there's 5 fighting divisions that have fought in Gaza. Admittedly, the 162nd and the 98th are the ones that have the most combat experience. But the overall number that the Israelis have claimed, total number of casualties since October 7th, is 3,800. So there's 3,814. So the 162nd Division is claiming 3,800 casualties just in that one division alone, which matches the overall number of claimed casualties in the IDF, which is just another one of these examples where these numbers just don't add up. Because if one division has 3,800 casualties, does that mean that the Israelis are lying about their casualties by 2, 3, or 4 times? Because there's been 4 divisions fighting in Gaza at the same time. In December, there was 4 divisions fighting at the same time. The Israelis used 3 divisions to attack Gaza City, and they're claiming in one division 3,800 casualties. So again, this is just another example of the Israeli casualty statistics not lining up with the official numbers, which they saw, their terminology is released for publication. They don't say overall number of casualties. They say this is the number of casualties released for publication. That's their wording. So again, just another example of something we've been tracking for the last 8 months, that none of these casualties statistics ever add up for the IDF. And this was just a really stark example of saying that one division has a casualty count equal to the entire Israeli Defense Forces admitted number of 3,800 casualties. So that was an operation in Tel Sultan. That was on the weekend. I just want to show you a video here that the IDF released the other day. They're showing you here raiding a house in Rafah, and they're pointing out here that that the Palestinians use holes in the wall, that they use mouse holes, which is, of course, something that we've been covering on this show since the first day of the ground war. And we actually told you that this was going to happen even before, because it's a standard way of fighting in an urban environment, to move between buildings through these mouse holes that the fighters have cut. And the IDF was really proud of these walking through walls, as they called it. In the Second Intifada, they had an entire doctrine based on it, and they were very excited about it, because this is an interview that 𝐄𝐤 𝐈𝐧𝐭𝐫𝐨𝐧𝐢𝐜 with the commander of the IDF's paratrooper brigade. And he said, "We decided to look at space architecturally differently. The space that you look at this room, what you're looking at, it's nothing but what you interpret it as. And we interpreted the alley as a forbidden place to walk through, and the door as a forbidden place to pass through, and the window as a place forbidden to look out." They've obviously forgotten that part of the doctrine. Because weapons await you in the alley and a booby trap awaits you at the door. This micro-tactical practice of moving through the walls turned into a method, and thanks to this method, we were able to interpret the space wholly differently! Exclamation mark. This is, again, an article from 𝐄𝐤 𝐈𝐧𝐭𝐫𝐴 quoting the commander of the IDF's paratrooper brigade. "If until now we were used to moving through roads and sidewalks, forget it. From now, we walk through the walls. We inverted the geometry." So they're super proud of that in the Second Intifada. I mean, people wrote whole books about it. 𝐄𝐤 𝐈𝐧𝐭𝐫𝐴, one of them, about this Israeli accomplishment. But of course, the Palestinians had been doing this long before the Israelis were doing it. And the Israelis released this video, I guess unaware that 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜 released this video. Let's look at number 7 here, Tamara. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜 released this video the other day. That this was an Eid video that they're showing. You can see their fighters there grabbing the Tandem 85. This guy here is grabbing a guerrilla action device. There's the what Qassam calls the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 EFP, explosively foreign penetrator. And then look at them walking through walls, not only walking through walls, but videotaping walls through the walls. So we see multiple scenes of it. And of course, 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜 has shown us this all along, and we've pointed this out on the resistance report all along, because the ability to move through the buildings without going outside is a core part of the resistance praxis. And we've seen that all the way through. So it was interesting, because I do follow all the Israeli releases in the same way that I follow all the Palestinian releases. And so for the Israelis to release that video this week and say this is a terrorist passageway, 8.5 months into the war, after we've seen dozens of these videos where fighters have used the holes in the walls, mouse holing as it's called. There we see the fighter attaching the fuse to the guerrilla action device, which is the IED, the improvised explosive device that is attached magnetically to Israeli vehicles. So I just wanted to point that out. The Israelis always think that their military doctrine is, especially before October 7th, was a world-class military doctrine. The Palestinians have, since October 7th, and particularly on October 7th, shown that to be just a total myth. The defeat of the IDF is something that will take maybe they'll never recover from, but we'll see. We won't predict the future. We have enough evidence right now to just talk about the present. We won't predict the future, but you know that the Israeli defeat of October 7th is not something that's going to be lived down easily. So let's take a look at another operation in Rafah. This is a sniper operation. Remember what the paratrooper commander said, that the windows, they don't stand in windows because that's dangerous. Well, here they are, just like hanging wires on the roof in Rafah. And it cost that soldier, again, these are edited. You can hop over to my Twitter feed to see the full videos. We edited this out, but this soldier, well, they all ran away and left him, and they left this one guy to drag him here to drag him into the room. The fighters with their helmets, look at, there's 3 guys here with helmets on. They run into the building and they never come back out. and they leave somebody that was in the building to drag their casualty out. So this is one of the 3,800 casualties of the 162nd Division in in fighting since October 7th. So this is we've seen these sniper operations. Of course, we've been covering these significantly, and anywhere the Israelis are, they're within sniper reach of Palestinian fighters. So that's the battlefield in the south. Again, fierce fighting in Rafah that makes it look difficult for the Israelis to achieve their objectives in Rafah. The talk in the Hebrew media is about how there's clearly not enough troops, and the fight in Rafah is being truncated. It's not being fought in the same way that that the Israelis fought, for example, in Khan Yunis, like I said, where it took 6 months. And then we remember in Khan Yunis, 6 months after the Israelis fought in Khan Yunis, they were hit with the Night of Power ambush. One of the most spectacular operations of this war happened 6 months into their operations in Khan Yunis, and they left the next day from Khan Yunis. In Rafah, we see these significant, fierce fights, significant toll, 22 admitted casualties in 40 days, and following right on the heels of that loss by the Israelis on Saturday, they're announcing tactical pauses in certain areas, and they're making it as if that is a humanitarian gesture rather than the gesture of an exhausted force that doesn't have the troops to hold territory at all in Rafah, just like they haven't been able to anywhere else in Gaza. And these terms like full operational control or to degrade a battalion, these are nonsensical terms that don't have any connection to the actual battle on the ground. So that's the battle, looking at the battle in the south.
Thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, hit like, leave a comment. These engagements help us with the YouTube algorithm, and it helps us to get around Silicon Valley censorship as much as possible. It does make a difference. You can also support our journalism by going to electronicintifada.net and clicking on donate now. Thank you.